As you may know, the popular show Ed, Edd and Eddy has been running for a long time. However, in 2003, between October 7th and 21st, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was known to some around the office that the primary writer of the show had been sick with the flu. So instead of going on to make episode 34, the show was supposed to replay episode 1. At 5 o'clock a.m. Eastern, people reported a very disturbing new episode premiering on Cartoon Network. Some children were unfortunate enough to see it. Apparently, the quality of the episode was mediocre when held to regular standards. The animation was choppy and the sound was constricted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down the screen similar to crappy VHS tapes were received. The scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing without changing props and other background objects. Stormy looking. Characters also behaved oddly. Instead of the normal goofy hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained that they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful towards each other, and constantly about to begin sobbing after the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why, but he spoke with a sexual tone, and that further bothered the viewers. I was one of these viewers. The episode began with Eddy walking down the street with Ed. I know that Ed was missing. There was an angular shot from in front of the two to show them walking toward the viewer. Eddy was wearing the angry look he always does when something goes wrong, and his eyes were red around the iris. Ed looked absolutely forlorn, practically dragged behind Eddy with tears in his eyes, which were both lazy and looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series antagonist, was riding his bike opposite of the Eds toward them. The shot became blurry and low moans were heard coming from Eddy before Kevin hit him, which never happened because the screen went black. The screen then snapped back. Kevin was again headed toward Eddy. The view was so blurry this time that all I saw was a green blob headed toward a yellow one. Again came the low moan, only this time it sounded like the microphone was broken. Loud static came, greatly overshadowing the sound. A claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddy's bed began. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and shivered. Waking up and getting out of bed, he moved oddly around the circular room, the fast pitter-patter of footsteps being the only audio. The steps' sounds were very clear as I was shown a bird's eye of him scampering around the room. There were no visible doors. Ed began screeching as he moved wildly around the cell of the room, faster and faster until the screen began blurring again. The purple room's color was swallowing a now orange blur. An extreme close-up of Eddy's front door then sat in absolute silence for a maddeningly long time. There were at least 2 minutes of dead silence and a door. Next, we saw Jimmy and Sarah at a doctor of some sort. Jimmy, obstructed in view by a hanging lamp, was crying loudly, with Sarah trying to comfort him in an unusually warm fashion. It hurts, Sarah. It hurts. Suddenly, the door of the room was smashed open by a new character. A dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of the shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room and Jimmy was shown. His headgear was mangled, the front bent upward, stretching his lip to a very high, tearing proportion. The front of his gums was trickling blood and teeth were missing. The disturbing part was that he had apparently lost both arms and legs beforehand and sat as a paraplegic. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion that the others had beaten him up and bent his headgear. The camera stayed on his mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. We were then instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf in his darkened shed, fisting the cow repeatedly. The visual loops and get blurry again as the scene pans out. Naz is reading a magazine on her couch. The quality is now perfect. Eddy is alone, without Ed. The quality declines, worse than before. He is still walking, the sun now lightening the mood somewhat as he smiles and begins running. The door is showing again, and we see through Eddy's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played violin is blaring, the only audio in this scene as he makes his way through the house. Eddy opens the door to his room. Johnny is shown under Naz's couch cushion. He crawls out on all fours in a comedic way and pops up behind her, still oblivious. I laughed because someone forgot to draw his eyes and I thought of a mole. Suddenly, I stopped laughing as he started swallowing her head, still in a cartoonish fashion, of course, but this was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling. Johnny held her like this until she went limp. A zoom in on his face revealed extremely small human eyes. Double D was laying on Eddy's floor, no longer in claymation. The camera showed Eddy's house for the remainder of the episode. Then the next program began on the spot. Well, here we have a lost episode creepypasta that's honestly not very good. And the reason why it's not very good, say it with me, it's heavily cliched. With the different, like, the audio being, like, terrible, and the audio switching between terrible audio to no audio to having, like, just pure sound effects, no music, none of that. It's the sound when being described in the story. I honestly don't know how to put this. This was just not a very good story. It was a short one too. And again, much like Mr. Mix I read yesterday and the Nickelodeon resignation incident, they're very short stories, but they weren't the kind of short that were short and sweet. They're the kind of short that were just short and just not very good. Now, to be fair, this Ed, Edd n Eddy creepypasta was written in 2010. So it was like very early creepypasta writing. Which would explain why it was so short and the quality of the story wasn't very good. As most creepypastas in the year 2010 really weren't, like Dead Bart and all that. This was just kind of like those, like that. So, I honestly don't really have much to say about this story. And because it was so short, I'm gonna go look for another one again. So, please bear with me. John Weldon isn't one of the better known names in animation. But those who saw his rather dark animated shorts tended to remember them. A Canadian, Weldon is best known in the United States for his cartoons that aired on Cartoon Network's compilation show, Zero Canada. His best known short is the disturbing To Be, a cartoon dealing with the ethics of cloning an individual existence. Other examples of his work are The Lump, a bizarre story about a growth deformity changing a man's life for the better, and Special Delivery, which includes murder, adultery, and even full frontal nudity. Despite what he got away with, there was one short Weldon made that only a few people have seen or heard of, Sunlit Nightmare. The exact year it was made isn't known, but indications point to the early or mid-1980s. Weldon had started to show signs of narcolepsy. Falling asleep suddenly at work, he would wake up screaming and refuse to say anything of what he had been dreaming about. When he wasn't asleep, he worked with feverish devotion on a new animated short, the aforementioned Sunlit Nightmare. Skilled at nearly every aspect of animation, Weldon made the entire thing himself, or at least seemed to. He said his newest creation was for children, something to air in between shows on kids' networks. He showed it to some executives at his company who were terrified and couldn't believe Weldon wanted to show it to a younger audience. Weldon didn't seem to care and went on to work on another project, but his narcolepsy had disappeared. It isn't clear what happened to the original copy of the short, but Zero Canada somehow got a copy and aired it once. One night in the summer of 1999. Recently, someone who apparently recorded the sole airing, uploaded it online, and the short was finally seen. It began with a pure black screen. There was no title, but it sounded like a small boy was singing. The shadows at night don't scare me. The sounds in the dark I can't let be. I close my eyes and let the darkness come, but the fear isn't there until I feel the sun. I can't tell which one is real. I can't tell apart the feel of the nightmares in my head. I don't understand how I'm not dead. After the song, the short transitioned to a small boy in the living room. The animation was very simple. The boy and the furniture were drawn in a squiggly style by black pen. The background and non-outline parts of the objects were paper white. The boy was nervously glancing around the room and was very jittery. While he looked, there was a voiceover. I used to be afraid of the dark. I would stay up all night, scared of the monsters that were hiding in the shadows. One day, I was tired from not sleeping the night before. I lay down on the couch and thought I could sleep when it was sunny out. I had the scariest dream ever. I couldn't even remember it at all. All I could recall was that the beam of sun was shining on me when I woke up. Ever since then, I haven't been afraid of the dark. The boy kept looking, and the view changed to behind the couch. A glob of black clay was behind it. Real clay. It started to grow and turn into some kind of insect or spider. When it was taller than the couch, it jumped out from behind and started chasing the boy. They ran through several rooms of the house. The drawing quality of the rooms improved with each new one, until they were in a bedroom against a live-action, completely frozen backdrop. The monster cornered the boy, grew a gigantic mouth, and swallowed him. The next part is hard to describe. It was all claymation. Clay insects, people, in transforming shapes, dancing, warping, and morphing. It was very fast-paced, but the music was slow and made entirely of high-pitched bells. The boy eventually fell out of one of his shapes. He was curled up in fear, sobbing. The view shifted back to the room from the beginning of the short, and the boy was lying on the floor, a yellow beam of sunlight shining on him. The singing started again. Every day it's the exact same thing. The monsters roar and bite and sting. No one is home. No one can help me. I wish I could leave, but outside I see the burning, dry glare, the brightness in the air. I used to fear the dark, but now I'm the only one who had to deal with an endless, hopeless fear of the sun. that honestly, this was honestly quite a bit unsettling. Not because it's scary for the sake of being scary, but because, and now this is just what I personally interpreted from the story. But what I interpreted from the story is the animation, the story is centered around is what caused Weldon to get rid of his narcolepsy. The animation was his very own nightmare. His very own nightmare brought to life. Once it was finished, that's when the narcolepsy just ended. He couldn't sleep because he was afraid. He's afraid that because he's been working so hard, he couldn't sleep, and it made him feel the fear of being watched and swallowed by work. And that's what I feel like made the story amazing. Weldon, the little boy, is supposed to represent Weldon, and the proclaimed spider was to represent his work. The work with all the work he was doing, it was consuming him. He did nothing but work, and that's what caused his narcolepsy. And that's what makes the story so great. Because this is something that can actually happen. If you work too much and don't rest enough, your worst fears will come to life and become your work. It's an absolutely amazing story, and I honestly can recommend this one. Sunlit Nightmare, you certainly did a fantastic job of portraying the fears of someone who does work too hard and doesn't take enough breaks. Something like this is what truly makes a story like this stand out from the rest. It's not this show's like the audio's distorted, or there's no audio, or the animation is bad. Now apparently the animation was a little terrible, but I feel like in this case that actually worked in the story's favor. Because again, apparently in the story, Weldon was working a lot, so he's really, really tired, and because of that, he couldn't do the animation as well as he normally would when he got rest, which honestly makes that, while it technically is a cliche, this is one of those rare cases where the cliche actually does end up working. And because of that, we gotta applaud the author for that. And this story was just phenomenal. But yeah, again, if you want to see the full uncut video of the footage used in this video. It will be up on Wednesday, so be on the lookout for that. And if you have any suggestions for a story I should read on Saturday, do let me know. And if it's a short one, give me like a second short one to read. Well, yeah, I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you so very much for watching. And stay tuned for more creepypastas.